Hello, good evening, and welcome to your award-winning specialized program. That's the Ion Pod here on Metropolitan Television. Ion Pod is proudly brought to you in association with the Ghana Revenue Authority, Goyle Company Limited, Serene Insurance, Ghana Link Network Services, and Meridian Port Services MPS. The show is proudly powered by the Ghana Port and Harbours Authority-GPHA. Indeed, our media partner on this journey of a lifetime is the Business and Financial Times, the BNFT. If you want to have a grasp of all that transpired in the show tonight, make a date and grab the Thursday edition of the BNFT, and you'll be able to see all that happened here on the show tonight. Indeed, we are streaming live on our social media handles. On Facebook, we are streaming live at Ghana Port and Harbours Authority. Ghana Port and Harbours Authority. Still on Facebook, we are streaming live at Port of Tema. Port of Tema. And on YouTube, we are streaming live at Ion Port Ghana. Ion Port Ghana. We shall be getting interactive with you in the course of the show, and so all you have to do is to send us your messages and comments ahead via our dedicated WhatsApp line, which is 0559-019-177. 0559-019-177. At the appropriate time, we shall share them with the rest of the world. And when I pick signals from our production team that the time is ripe, we shall activate our phone lines for you to call in and contribute to the discussion. My name is Kennedy Mona. We are going for a quick break. When we bounce back, we'll continue the show. Please do stay with us.
Every now and again, Goyle makes good things happen. This time, Goyle has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goyle Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. Goyle Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. Goyle Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with Goyle Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. Goyle has that sorted. Goyle, good energy.
Electricity, then pay your taxes. Yeah. Our taxes, our future.
Because you see, without our taxes, we wouldn't have good roads, good schools, better hospitals, street lights, and other very important social amenities. When we pay our taxes, we give our children free and quality education. Talga, my money too small. Why should I pay my tax? Look, small. Salifo, it doesn't matter how small or big your business or income is, you still have to pay your taxes. The little taxes from each and every one of us, when put together, could give your community clean water or that deprived school with tables and chairs. Please pay your taxes. It is your responsibility. It is your civic duty. It is the law.
Impressive factory. If only I had listened to you, I wouldn't have been in this mess. That devastating fire virtually wiped out the whole factory and my warehouse.
Remember my misfortunes last year? Serene Insurance Asset All Risk Fire policy that I took were there to pay for my damaged stocks in the warehouse, and my machines that were affected by the floods have been replaced. My accident vehicle is back on the road thanks to Serene Insurance motor policy. Currently, my goods are on the IC covered with their marine cargo insurance policy. I was just telling Ajima about Serene Insurance.
Oh, Ajima,
tell him more.
As a road contractor, I make sure I do my contractors all risk insurance for the projects and then workers' compensation for all the workers on site. With Serene Insurance, they will make sure they will cover your unknown tomorrow today.
Serene Insurance, a new face of insurance. Call us now.
MPS Terminal 3 is Africa's new state-of-the-art container terminal at Tema Port. For manufacturers, agro-processors and traders, the new port means business can be done faster. This infrastructure boost will improve Ghana's port handling capacity, connect more trading routes, and oil the engine of growth for the economy, creating greater opportunities across all sectors as Africa's markets merge and become the largest trading bloc globally. MPS, we connect, you thrive.
right, so you're welcome back. We'll be taking a look at happenings in the port and shipping industry in the course of the week. But before we do that, I would like to introduce our guests tonight to you. We have two of them all the way in Nigeria who are joining us via Zoom. They've been online for quite some time now, so we'd like to acknowledge their presence online, and then we'll go and take the local stories. And when we come back, we'll continue the discussion. So tonight we are having a discussion with Mr. Kayode Safienu, who is an export trading company specialist and organizational strategist. He's there. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for joining us. And we also have Dr. Olufemi Adebiyi, who's also an SME specialist and organizational strategist. He's also joined us on the line. Good evening, sir. I can't hear you. Have you muted your mics over there? If you can, if you have muted them, if you can switch them on. Hello, good evening, Mr. Safienu, and good evening, Dr. Adebiyi.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Good evening. We are quite happy to be with you.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Can I hear the other guest?
Yes, good evening.
Dr. Adebiyi.
It's a good pleasure.
Doc, yes, great,
yes,
fantastic.
Good evening. It's
fantastic.
a good pleasure to be with you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. We have a tradition here on the show. We'll have to take a look at happenings in the port and shipping industry in the past week before we come to you, and then we'll zoom into our discussion proper. In the studios, ladies and gentlemen, also is Mr. Edward Akrong. He is the president of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders, GIF. Mr. President, good evening, sir, and welcome. Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. So tonight we're taking a look at happenings in the port and shipping industry. That's by way of local stories. And in the course of the week, the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders launched a research hub. We'll tell you more about it in the course of the show, because you can see the president is already here. And the pilotage board also in the course of the week, inaugurated new members. We'll be bringing you that particular story. Plus the fact that export trading companies in the African continent, on the African continent, held a seminar here in our country. We'll bring you these stories and more. Please stay.
Freight Forwarders GIF has launched a research hub, which is a brand new initiative to provide far-reaching insights on cutting-edge research findings to assist policy decisions regarding international trade on the continent of Africa and the world at large. GIF over the past 3 decades has frontlined activities such as competency-based education and training, advisory role, and advocacy in the port and maritime industry. The Institute remains the only partner that truly interfaces with all the entities in the Ghanaian port and maritime sector, leaving an indelible mark in the evolution of cross-border trade in Ghana. Speaking at the event, the president of GIF, Edward Akrong, said the establishment of the research hub will make GIF relevant to the port and shipping sector by contributing to the shaping and development of national policies that affect international trade.
Now, as actors of Ghana's international tradeways, our marching orders had been long issued. We have huffed and puffed, bared our teeth at whoever needed to see the Mensa in us. But we are here and now, choosing the path of science, research, as a veritable tool with which to buy our future. Folks, our destiny is defined, and it does not look like we have too many choices than to take advantage of the opportunities the fourth industrial revolution presents. We are very well plugged in at the primary data source. The GIF Research Hub is timely and critical for our sustainability.
The former Member of Parliament for Tema Central, Kofi Brako, who is also a former GIF president, said the research hub will provide a lot of data which will help improve the ease of doing business in the country.
The research hub that we are all looking at today, if it becomes viable, it's something that is going to give us a lot of data, and that data is going to support us improve upon our systems.
He said freight forwarders have the capacity to contribute meaningfully to national development, hence the need for them to use their research to influence of political parties to achieve the needed results.
We are a private sector entity, so to me, we should look within. And when we have looked within, and improve upon our systems, the politicians will identify us and then they will deal with us. But until such time that we are capable, because as I speak to you now, they don't think that we have the capacity, but we do.
The event was also used to outdoor the GIF Insight, a quarterly magazine for the port and shipping industry. The Pilotage Board of the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority is, per the law of the authority, mandated to regulate marine operations at Ghana's ports. The board constitutes representatives from the Ghana Maritime Authority, the Ghana Navy, the Regional Maritime University, a retired marine pilot, the harbour masters of the ports of Tema and Takoradi, and the head of legal at GPHA. Due to the dynamic nature of pilotage and the evolution of shipping, the Pilotage Board has been reconstituted and inaugurated for the continuous running of affairs regarding marine operations at the ports.
The Pilotage Board have really assisted marine operations in keeping marine operations top on the mark. You know, vessels are international players in the maritime industry. They call Tema, Takoradi. The next port may be a port outside Ghana, Rotterdam, Liverpool, New York, and as such, they have to be handled professionally.
The inauguration also saw the end of the tenure of seasoned marine pilot and founding member of the board, Mike Zeble, who has contributed to the coaching and mentorship of marine pilots at the ports over decades. David Kobna Smith will take his place on the board as ex-pilot.
My appreciation rather goes to you, the handlers of the port, especially the harbour masters. I've seen you handle ships, and that is very good. I've seen all of you, the way you work, and still controlling, the talks, and keep on doing that. They are very, very valuable objects to the port.
The Africa Export and Import Bank, Afri-Exim Bank, has selected Ghana as part of a continental initiative to facilitate the creation and expansion of export trading companies to promote intra-Africa trade under the AfTA. Export trading companies provide support services for firms engaged in exporting, such as shipping, warehousing, insurance, market information, among others. As a result, an ETC seminar has been held in Accra to sensitize African countries about the unique role of export trading companies in diversifying African exports and promoting industrialization in the continent. The seminar, which brought together key private and public sector actors in the continent, also discussed how ETCs are organized, operated, supported and regulated by government agencies. The Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Herbert Krapper, said the government will play its role in providing the requisite regulation to attract private investments and partnerships in setting up ETCs. He emphasized Ghana's readiness for vibrant trading under AfTA.
The guided trade initiative that has been introduced by the AFCFTA Secretariat is taking off with Ghana, as well as other countries, Cameroon, Tanzania, Tunisia, Egypt, and a host others, Rwanda. And Ghana will take full advantage of this guided trade. We were in Takoradi last week to inspect a ceramics factory that is going to be part of this guided trade. This ceramics factory is going to export ceramics under the AFCFTA to Cameroon when this guided trade starts. We also identified 11 other companies. So in all, Ghana is going to use 12 companies to export to Egypt, to Tanzania, to Tunisia, to Cameroon, Rwanda, to Kenya under the guided trade initiative.
The Regional Chief Executive Officer for Anglophone West Africa at Afri-Exim Bank, Eric Moncho Intong, indicated his outfit's resolve to fulfill its mandate of promoting, financing and facilitating trade in Africa.
We do not just provide financing alone, we also provide facilitation. And part of facilitation is capacity building for the SMEs to be properly supported, for AFCFTA to be successful. The export trading companies need to be capacitized by training like the workshop.
All right, so those were happenings in the port and shipping industry in the course of the week. We shall be coming your way with the international news later on the show. But for now, we're going for the word of the day. And today's word of the day is bulk carrier or bulker. Bulk carrier or bulker.
A bulk carrier or bulker is a ship that transports unpacked cargo such as coal, ore, or grain in large quantities.
All right, so you're welcome back. We're now zooming into our discussion proper tonight. And tonight we're taking a look at the role of export trading companies in shoring up or scaling up Africa's exports. In the first place, we also want to know what an export trading company is, and then we'll take a look at their role in, scaling up exports from our continent, as the African continent. And so we couldn't have assembled a better panel to do justice to the topic tonight than we have done. And I would once again like to introduce Mr. Kayode Safiano, who is an export trade company specialist and organizational strategist, and then Dr. Olufemi Adebiyi, who is an SME specialist and also an organizational strategist. They both were in Ghana in the course of the week for this particular, ETC seminar that took place. Also in the studios, I told you earlier on, is Mr. Edward Akron, who is the president of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders. Good evening once again to Dr. Adebiyi and then Mr. Safiano.
Good evening.
Great. So let me begin with you, Mr.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Let me begin with you, Mr. Safiano. In fact, from you were in Ghana last week. What was the experience like?
Well, I think it was quite nice. Before Ghana, we ran the ETC seminar series in 5 other countries, and the Ghana experience was quite very nice, exceptional really. It was nice. The seminar was well received, and follow-up meetings with government officials, the Honorable Minister of Trade and the Deputy Minister was quite nice and encouraging. So we hope that Ghana could soon be a model country for establishing an export trading company.
Did you have any specific role you played during the seminar?
Yes, my colleague, Dr. Adebiyi, we facilitated the seminar and we handled most of the presentations. And then, of course, Afrexim Bank also handled presentation that spoke about the role of the bank in supporting the emergence and development of export trading companies in Africa. So we were the lead facilitators for the seminar. That's Dr. Adebiyi and myself.
Okay, and would you say at the end of the day you were able to realize the objective for which this seminar was held?
I think the first thing that one would like to say is first the level of participation and the fact that not just that we had the right number of people and the category of people in the room, we also had a very quite interesting interaction. So, and also the interactions that we had also demonstrated that there was a lot of interest in establishing an export trading company as a unique institution in Ghana. And as I said earlier on, this interest not only came from the private sector, we also had interest of the government of Ghana as represented by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, which was quite encouraging. And we had participation at the highest level of government, which was quite encouraging.
Now, are you able to tell us the numbers that took part and from how many countries?
No, the focus was on Ghana. In terms of countries we've handled before Ghana, there were 5 other pilot countries, including South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kenya. So Ghana was the 6th country. So and there could still be other countries we're going to cover, but these are the pilot countries selected.
Right. Okay, so let me come to Dr. Adebiyi and also find out from him what his experience was during this particular seminar that you guys held for the Ghanaian exporters.
Thank you very much. As my colleague just hinted, so it's a very good experience for us. I must say that the feedback, even from the interactions in the hall, were pointers at the fact that Ghanaian economy, or the participants representing the Ghanaian economy at the seminar, were enthusiastic about how quickly ETCs can get off the ground. As my colleague said, the fact that we have participation at the highest level of government is also a great pointer to the seriousness, because the following day after the seminar, we met the senior minister in charge of trade, and we spent a good time with him, and he led us into the concern, the desire, the curiosity of the Ghanaian government to move rapidly and possibly score a first in starting the first ETC in Africa. And so those were some of the things, the feelings we had that made us conclude that we couldn't have had it better. And yes, it was the last country we had this interaction with, but it turned out, in our judgment, to be the most enthusiastic, the one that showed more curiosity about how quickly this type of institution that would drive an expansion in intra-African trade, how quickly it could happen in Africa. So it was a good experience, very good experience.
Now, what would you say was the consideration or factors that went into the selection of Ghana for this particular training or seminar, as it were?
Well, you know, the African Export-Import Bank is a sponsor of this project. The bank had made an accelerated or an enhanced level of intra-African trade one of its pillars of a strategic plan. This it has done now for 2 consecutive plans. And so in the judgment of the bank, it is the intention that if it's right in Ghana, it's likely to be right in most countries, particularly of West Africa. And then, of course, you may also recall that the headquarters of the African Continental Free Trade Area is in Ghana. So this initiative is actually primarily speeding up the rate of, speeding up the boost we expect, realizing the boost we expect in intra-African trade. So if after it's there, the secretariat is there, and Ghana is also one of the countries, as we said during the seminar, which has the right economic setting for having the ETCs, then it goes without saying that the time is now for Ghana to take the lead. So the rationale for selecting Ghana amongst the countries is because Ghana turned out to be one of the important countries on the radar of African Export-Import Bank.
All right. Let me come to Mr. Safiano and find out from you how important these export trading companies are in the scheme of things as far as exports on the African continent are concerned.
Okay, thank you, the moderator. Let me start by stating briefly the issues with African trade historically and as at now. Africa's share of world trade is small, actually very small indeed. It's about 3%. The structure of trade is defective and inimical to economic growth. The features about this structure of trade includes over-concentration on traditional primary commodities, concentration in terms of trading partners. These trading partners are essentially informed by our colonial past. Most African countries suffer from this phase. Concentration in terms of inter-African trade or inter-regional trade is small, about 16 to 18% in the last couple of years. We have high trade transaction cost, whichever way you look at it. If you look at time it takes to export, the cost of export documentation, the border customs challenges, high cost of doing business generally, all these adversely affect the competitiveness of African exports. In the last 15 years, as probably you know, most African countries import more than they export, which means that most African countries are in perpetual balance of trade deficit. Then we have lack of strong institutions with capacity to compete globally. These are just some highlights of the African trade structure as we have it today. Of course, the conclusion one could reach from this is that this state of affairs is not sustainable. But we know, and studies have proven that, trade is beneficial to an economy. Studies have demonstrated that consistently because trade leads to faster economic growth, higher innovation, improved productivity. And these are, features of economy, an economy that can progress. And trade facilitates all this. So what do we have to do in African countries, most African countries? Just like Dr. David said, these were the considerations that led African Export-Import Bank to determining or concluding that intra-African trade is going to be a very strong strategic pillar, and it has been so in the last couple of years for the bank. And the then bank sponsored, the Export Trading Company Strategy for Africa, which our firm had the rare privilege of assisting the bank to put together. So the ETC, the Export Trading Company, properly conceptualized, is important to trade in Africa because it will assist to ameliorate all the above challenges. ETC will be expected to focus on export of diverse, non-traditional value-added goods and services to many markets. Engages in other ancillary functions, warehousing, local transportation, shipping, insurance, and then consciously engage SMEs and other partners in the supply and production value chains, and provides much needed support to these value chain producers in terms of production know-how, finance, risk management, and many more. And then the ETC will be able to leverage, because by design they are big and large and vast institutions. This will be able to leverage its scale to reduce impact of high transaction costs, thus increasing competitiveness. If you look at all this, and that is why I said the ETC, if properly conceptualized, and we actually gave insight about the concept, the proper conceptualization of an ETC. So in view of the historical contribution of ETC to economic growth, particularly in Asia, so just like I said, African Bank is taking the lead in this. The bank has decided to champion the promotion of these special institutions and to encourage African countries to establish ETC, which will assist the continent to improve intra-African trade, industrialization of the continent, and overall economic growth of countries in the continent. So the ETCs are special, important institutions at this point in time in the continent.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Safiano. I would be coming to Dr. Adeyemi to find out from you what role the port can play in terms of helping, us have smooth exports out of the African continent. What special role does the port have to play? But let me come in to Mr. Akron. who's the president of Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders, and find out from you. You have been dealing with exporters on a daily basis.
Yes.
I mean, you help them export, you clear their import for them and all that. Let me find out from you, what are some of the issues that crop up in the course of trying to help these exporters, do business in our ports?
Basically, I think I was listening to Mr. Sofiano, and I think most of these things have been realized. The major and like the basic is, I think we have a certain bankruptcy in information.
Right.
What I get from a lot of the exporters who come around is that, first of all, they want to know, I have these products. Where can I send them to? Of course, I know about exports. I want to send them to somebody. How can I take advantage of what I've done? Who am I going to get to supply to? First of all, so that's a certain bankruptcy.
Right.
There, first, people go into these productions, especially from the farm. For those who are into agriculture and all that, say, "Well, I want to do green pepper. I've done lots of it. I've done cashew. Where do I take it to?" So he comes asking you this information. Of course, then you know that there's a certain bankruptcy there. Right. I know GEPA, the Ghana Export Promotion Authority, has been doing a lot right now. But then we have certain ideas as to how this could happen. Because these small time, exporters do not have the resources. Of course, they do not have the connections out there. So what we see is that if there's a certain integration, a certain consolidation, that is if GEPA can come out and say, okay, if you are into this product, this is how we can consolidate your goods together.
Right.
I mean, once we bring all of you together, then we can maybe take them to a particular source. So you can also enjoy, the resource and then build up capacity. So that is one major thing. The other thing, which I think when these exporters come, again, is also a bankruptcy of information. We don't have one central point where all the permits that are required for a certain product to get out of the system. Okay? So I'll tell you, recently somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, I have charcoal. I want to export charcoal. What permits do I?" Even on the side of a freight forwarder in Ghana, there's no one particular source where you'd go to and say, "I'm going to open this page and know that for charcoal, I have to go to the Energy Commission, I have to go to Standards Authority, or I have to go." So these are some of the basic issues when it comes to export. As for documentation-wise, I think we've done very well. I mean, the integrated customs management system, is fully in place to sort out all the documentation, which we do. The other thing is on the outside, before it gets, say, from the farm gate to the airport or to the seaport.
Right.
Okay, there are issues that have to be resolved. Okay, there are examples. I think when we go on, we can have a few discussions.
Yes.
I'll give you some. A few years ago, there was a certain ban by the EU on our vegetables that were being exported.
Yes.
Why was it so? Of course, permits are issued before these exports go. But why did that happen? It's all because of a lack of education.
Right.
Okay? Because sometimes the products, the standards that the EU requires, these have to be known before it even gets from the farm gate, so that if it's a matter of protecting the vegetable in a certain way, be the packaging or if a certain, it has to be in a certain frozen temperature to get to the port for export, all of that would have to be, the farmer has to be trained. So again, I say it's just the balance in education and in some information. These are the problems that I see. There are the logistical issues that going on we can talk about.
Right. Yeah, I just want to find out from Mr. Safiano made mention of the fact that trade in Africa already, its structure is quite defective. Is this something that you agree with?
It is defective. Okay, one major defect, and I know the African Continental Free Trade Area is doing very well. I think we're putting all the basics together, but one important thing: transport. Transport. We want to trade. How do I trade with you? You're in Congo. I want to exchange your flowers, your beautiful flowers in Congo, for something that I want to export to Congo. But transport. If I have to go by flight to Congo, if there was a direct flight, it would only take me an hour or so, an hour and 20 minutes to get to Kinshasa.
Yeah.
See, but now if you want to go to Kinshasa, how do you go? You have to go by Africa or something to Togo, stay for an hour or two, do a transit. This whole 1 hour thing now becomes 4 hours. How much can you take even by air and the expense? Okay? A friend of mine now wants to take 2 containers from Takrady to a place called Yapeka in Liberia.
Right.
Okay? So he has to go through Lubo, through Ivory Coast. Now, how do you get the information? I'm chatting with a friend of mine, another agent in Elubo, who's giving me the details of how to, and this thing is so,
it's cumbersome.
I mean, he kept talking to me on the phone, the processes that you have to go through. Now, how open are these processes? Because I know those in my country. How do I know about those in Ivory Coast? I contact another agent there, and then they give me this whole procedure. Okay, so there are certain deficiencies. I heard Mr. Safiano talk about the time alone spent in our export processes, and that is a deficiency. So transport-wise, how am I going to trade with others? If I have to take a container just to Sierra Leone or something, it will surprise you that there's no West Coast. We don't have any vessels on the West Coast that we're going to use for trading. So then these containers or whatever I have to take to Sierra Leone will have to go up to Europe, maybe Algeciras or something, and then come down. So look at the time frame. How are we going to trade? So I think transport is the main bane here.
I remember,
so these are the
I remember Stanley Aholo came out with the MV Adobia, which was a feeder vessel.
Yes.
But I think it was short-lived.
So it got short. Why did it get short-lived? So there are other ideas as to how we can sustain. And in fact, we need to improve, how do we, get investors, local investors to go into the maritime business or having vessels that there are lots of things we could do. What do we do? Ships carry cargo, and so they need cargo to move. If there's a certain assurance that, look, you don't just go empty and maybe carry a few things down. If there's a certain assurance that they can have cargo to go in and come out, how that is worked out with the other, countries is okay. I'll give you a certain assurance. Maybe we'll give you a certain percentage of our cargo, our cocoa that we carry out. So that when you come, you're coming back. Make it you can carry, things that our traders are also importing into Ghana. Then, if those assurances are there, it all can be worked out. Okay? Because you tell me why Adobia went down or didn't do well. Of course, it's just for these same reasons. If the ship doesn't get cargo, it can't operate. Understand? So
right. Okay. So I would want to find out from you what recommendations you would want to make in order to scale up or to ensure high productivity amongst Ghanaian exporters. But you hold on with that and think about it. Chew on that. Whilst I get back to the lines and speak to Dr. Ademi and find out from him what role the ports can play, in their quest to support exports. If you can hear me, Dr. Ademi.
Yes. Sorry, I have an interference here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Doc.
Okay. Zakron just mentioned some of these problems now. The ports are not just the gateways for some of our domestic trade, but virtually for all our international trade, because they facilitate the movement of the bulk. The bulk are the major goods we move here and there in the process of trade. And we know that the sea options offer the cheapest possible means of moving these cargoes. And these ships dock at ports. Whether the goods we are talking about are finished products or raw material, both in volume and value terms, they have to pass through ports. So it means efficient ports we make for good turnaround of ships. And then if this fails, unfortunately, there'll be demurrage, and there'll be increased cost of cargo handling. So as important as ports are, whether their effect now get transmitted into the efficiency in trade depends on the state of the ports themselves. So ports are very significant, very important. They play crucial roles, but how well they play this role depends on the kind of infrastructure they have, the kind of skills that work in them, and the efficient layout of such ports. On the average, I must say that African ports are less efficient than their counterparts in the developed economies. I understand, I'm not very current now, that some ports close for public holidays in Africa, or they observe shutdowns, whereas overseas ports work 24/7, 365, 366 days a year. So all of this contribute to how efficiently the port services help, aid, or hinder our trade. So, tardy, inefficient ports have serious implications for trade competitiveness. And as Mr. Sufianu just told us now, obviously, the cost of doing business in Africa, most African countries, are higher than other countries in most other continents. And one of the elements can be traced to even the port efficiency in handling these cargoes and all the goods and stuff. So it's not about infrastructure alone. We know there's a huge infrastructural deficit in our ports, but also the use of capacity in terms of those who run and operate the port. So efficient linkage with the port can also not be ignored for landlocked economies. You know, some of our countries in Africa are landlocked, and so they have to be movement from the port to all these places. So if we have efficiency at the port, they also have implications for those other means of modes of transportation. So bottom line, if our ports are very critical, very important, very crucial to how we do, how well we perform in trade, there are other factors, some of which Mr. Sufianu has mentioned. For example, our outputs are so low. So the tonnage that a port handles will also go a long way to determine efficiency. If the tonnage is high, then the the cost of operating in the port will also will go down, vice versa. We know that some ships stay waiting for cargo because they don't want to return empty from Africa. So all of these have implications for how efficiently our ports contribute to international trade. So to sum up, ports are very important, particularly for international trade, but how much importance we derive from them depend on their state of operation. So that would be my answer.
Doc, don't you agree that African ports are doing their best? Because we're told that the shipping industry, so to speak, is quite, capital intensive. And so if they have to inject a lot of money, they would have to borrow a lot. But despite that, they are still doing their bit to scale up and to ensure that they have the requisite equipment and infrastructure to be able to push. Don't you agree that they are doing their best, but just that perhaps you think that their best is not enough?
No, I agree completely that they are doing their best, but the world is not a global village. So if your best is not comparable to your partners or the people you are competing with, then it means you have to up your best. That's the point. I cannot dispute the fact that our ports are doing their best, but you also know the efficiency at ports vary from one country to another, even in West Africa. I know some people would prefer to ship into neighboring countries and then do some road movement of the goods from those ports in those countries to their own country. That means also not attesting to the fact that the level of efficiency even still vary from one port to another in Africa. So the fact remains that our ports are doing their best, yes, given the limitations and the constraints they have to work with, but unfortunately they are in competition with the other ports around the world. So we just have to do something to up the game and ensure that we are not running a port in 2022 that have essentially facilities that other ports stopped using maybe in 2010. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Right. Okay, let me come to Mr.
Say something about this.
Let me come to Mr. Safiano. You want to say something?
Yes, about this, in addition to what Dr. Davis said.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he mentioned about efficiencies. I think from the experience we have, of course, we're familiar with, the cargo processing or the process of handling cargo, who most of the time also be a source of inefficiencies. If you have multiple agencies, in a port handling processing documents rather than streamlining the documentation, it could lead to inefficiencies we experienced in ports. I can say that for information we've had recently concerning ports in Nigerian ports. So I'm not talking about only seaport. I even we have to extend that to airport, because we have cargo moving in these two using these two channels. Of course, the major one is the seaport. So the level of efficiency being quite low also impacts on cost. And as probably must have seen from studies conducted by UNCTAD, the cost of transportation, in Africa is relatively much higher than the average in the world. So as a percentage of import. Of course, the other gentleman mentioned clearly, which is correct, about the throughput, the cargo throughput being quite low. Right. That also affects the cost. I agree with that. But again, efficiencies at the port will have to be addressed in African countries, so that we need to make the ports more efficient. As they become more efficient, we're able to reduce the cost of running them. And then we can pass this cost saving to the users of the ports.
All right, so I'm still staying with you, Mr. Safiano, and just want to find out from you whether you've had occasion to assess our strength as a continent in terms of strong institutions or well-equipped institutions that aids exports and other trade services.
Yes, definitely. Actually, historically, in the continent, we had strong institutions for export in the commodity bourse. Although these bourses have now been dismantled following in most African countries structural adjustment programs. So yes, but of course we know the problems with the commodity bourse. But in terms of support for smallholder farmers, in terms of organizing export, in terms of ensuring that export goods or primary commodities are exported and earnings are generated, I would say they were strong institutions. Now, but of course they concentrated on primary commodities, which we have said is not going to help Africa going forward. We want to leave the trap of this primary commodity export. So also, some of them also exhibited market concentration, which, as I said earlier on, was informed by our colonial past. But in terms of the fact that they provide all the additional services, they were, I would say, they were strong institutions. And that is why today we praise Ghana, the government of Ghana, for retaining and modernizing the Ghana Cocoa Board. And of course, its subsidiary, the Ghana Marketing Company.
Yeah.
So if we are looking at the route to developing, fastly developing export trading company in Ghana, the Cocoa Board could be one institution that could easily transform to a properly constituted export trading company. And what do we expect to happen should that government consider that route? The company should be, or the board should be prepared to diversify the export, not only diversify the export or add value to the export, so that we can stop exporting our jobs to Switzerland where chocolate is made, and then also attempt to diversify its market. But already they are providing, support along the value chain, warehousing, shipping, insurance, and so on. They're already on the way to providing these additional activities. So I would say, yes, we used to have strong institutions, but no longer, because when the fact that the commodity bourses are gone. And that is why we're proposing that we need strong institutions in the form of export trading company. And existing commodity bourses where they exist can easily convert, because they are already used to international business. So it will be easier for them to transform to be a mainstream export trading company, or to be mainstream export trading companies.
Okay, so let me come to Dr. Ade, and find out from him. Ghana or Africa's trade, global trade percentage or share is said to be a paltry 3%, which is so abysmal and very low compared to other continents. I just want to find out from you what some of the factors are that accounts for this particular trend and what we can do to up our game, on the global stage as far as exports are concerned.
Thank you very much, presenter. There are two key factors which I will mention very quickly. Number one is the domination of our trade landscape by primary commodities, which Mr. Sufiano just spoke about now. You see, the world is moving away from trade in primary commodities. Maybe I need to say this, that we have in the developing economies, the domination of primary commodities, like either agricultural or solid minerals, and compared to developed economies where primary commodities trading constitutes less than 5% of their GDP. So, and the reason why a domination of a trade landscape by primary commodities will imply low level of trade is because they are not as flexibly amenable or easily adaptable to suit situations in the market. For example, somebody is exporting a primary commodity, which is agricultural. You are talking about now to keep the shelf life, to lengthen it, the possibilities of wastages, of storage damages, and all those things. So all those constraints of handling and processing, the bulky, difficult to manage primary commodities constitute a drag on trade. So the domination of primary commodities inadvertently has become one of the albatross, one of the major weights pressing down the volume of trade from Africa. So let's put this at the back of our mind. So if we are moving away from primary commodities, you will see by intuition and also in practical response, you will find that the volume of trade will go up. That's one of the things ETCs aim at doing, promoting trade in manufacturers and semi-manufacturers. So the dominance of primary commodities is one. Number two major factor, is actually the level of output, the aggregate level of output. Whatever you want to sell, whatever Africa wants to sell, must first be produced. Do you know that the GDP of Africa accounts for only 2.84% of global GDP? So it actually means that even from the point of what's available to sell, we are low. So with a very low level of output globally or generally in Africa, coupled with the fact that the bulk of these outputs are also traded as primary commodities, we've already shot ourselves in the foot as far as contributing substantially to trade, global trade is concerned. So if we must reverse this trend, if you must hope again from 3%, the paltry 3% that you talked about, then the number one thing we must do is that, number one, we must stimulate production. Our aggregate output must increase relative to the world, the rest of the world. And number two, we must rebalance the dominance of primary commodities and move towards manufacturers and semi-manufacturers. If these two factors are dealt with, apart from other structural rigidities here and there, I can see a very sharp upward swing in a proportion of trade in the world.
All right, let me come to Mr. Safiano and find out from you. In all of this, there are one particular category of people who play lead roles in terms of imports and exports, and this is the freight forwarders. These are the freight forwarders, or clearing agents as we call them, here in Ghana. Fortunately for us, tonight we have the head of the biggest freight forwarding fraternity or association in Ghana. That's the head of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders, is the president, Mr. Akrong, in the studios. I just want to find out from you what role you think they can play in the scheme of things as far as this whole discussion is concerned.
Oh, very, very, very important role, I think, should think for the freight forwarding community in facilitating the movement of goods, both import and export. One thing you must realize that when we talk about export trading company, as the name implies, the primary focus is on export. And just like we have been saying so far, export of, preferably export of manufactured goods. But they also engage in import. You know, by the time they fully develop, they engage in import, they can engage in domestic trading, retailing, if you look at them. So these are huge institutions. The freight forwarding business or industry definitely has a huge role to play in facilitating trade in terms of import and export in support of export trading company. One thing I can assure the trade forwarding sector is that the higher the trade, the more business they have to do. And the more business they have to do, I want to believe that the more efficient they will have to become in supporting it, because the cost of freight forwarding, you know, could also add to cost of doing business if it's not, if this business, the freight forwarding business and businesses are not efficiently run. So one will expect as complementary to the supporting the export institute, export trading company program to be a very strong and efficient freight forwarding sector.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Safiano. Let me come back to Dr. Adeyemi and find out from you how these export trading companies are going to address the issue of primary export associated with African countries instead of industrial products, so to speak.
The minister, how they will stimulate industry as opposed to primary commodities. Yes. Yeah, you know, by their nature, we made this clear during the seminar in Ghana. ETCs can come into operation through any of the two major models. They could start from trade and move into manufacture, or they could start from manufacture and grow into trade. So you see that in both cases, in both approaches to forming ETC, the emphasis is on manufacture. So like my colleague said, if we are going to have the commodity box convert, one of the things they must pay attention to is moving away from exporting primary commodities to exporting processed and semi-processed products. So by their nature, therefore, somehow by their design, they stimulate the manufacturing process, either because they start from there and they are trading, or they are trading and they backward integrate into doing that. So you see the emphasis of ETC is on manufacture. And so in primary commodity terms, the export similarity index of African countries are very high. That's why Nigeria cannot trade cocoa with Ghana, or Ghana trading cocoa with Cote d'Ivoire. So because we have similarities in this area. So if we are limiting ourselves only to the primary commodity, we may find that.
Okay, I think we've lost Dr. Adebi over there, but let me come into the studio and come to Mr. Akrong. I told you I was coming to find out from you what recommendations to make, you know, for us to be able to help or assist our exporters to build capacity and to ensure higher productivity.
Okay. So, like, I think we've heard a lot from Dr. Adebi. There you go. From Dr. Adebi and Mr. Sufiano. Yes. So, like I was saying, going back to it, first of all, is the bankruptcy in information. What do we do? Maybe get the ministry, that the Ministry of Trade, be the Ministry of Agriculture, or, you know, any ministry who would help, that we have a bank of information on exports. What can you do? We know what it is with the, you know, the traditional, you know, exports. So, like Mr. Sufiano mentioned, I mean, Ani Cocoa Board has gone to that height where they don't have an issue there. What about the non-traditional exports that we do? Okay, so that if that information is easily accessible, anyone who wants to trade in these commodities can easily go on a certain portal and find out that, oh, this is and this is what I need. These are the permits that I require. Okay, if they do not have the capacity, like the SMEs and all that, then we move to the next step. What can they do? Looking at the export trading companies, like they're trying to promote. What happens to Cocoa Board? Cocoa Board is buying cocoa from, you know, all the farmers across, right? and they consolidate these and buy. So same thing can be replicated for the the non-traditional exports. That where we can gather all these, consolidate them through these export trading companies, and then they can move ahead to do what? To do the exports on their behalf. And I guess everybody's happy. So these are some of the deficiencies I think, if taken care of, yes, would really, push our exports. Again, I think we've done well in certain aspects. As for that of documentation, like I said, well, the digitalization agenda has taken us through. The ICOMS is working fine for, for documentation purposes. And then for ports, well, you must agree, I think I'll be singing to to preaching to the choir if I tell you about what the efficiency of our port right now and good turnaround time. And that also was talked about. So I think those are the areas which we need to look at. First of all, education. And, the information bankruptcy, closing that gap, making sure that everybody knows what they can do, where they can export to, what they need to do to make sure that they don't have any problems with their export. And also, then, the support that they can get. If these trading companies are set up, then they can do the consolidation of these, the small products coming from these SMEs, who do not have the capacity to do the exports on their own. Yes.
To help this whole discussion, you heard Mr. Safiano and some of the recommendations he made to you as straightforwardness. And what do you make of? And
he's right on point. He's right on point. If we are not efficient, trust me, this whole thing. I mean, if you're dealing with a non-efficient, freight forwarder or clearing agent, then you're going to have issues. You have to know your business. Right. That is why we in the Ghana Institute of Freight Forward make sure that we have the training institute. We need to train our members. They need to be on point and up to date on all issues, because you see, we are the center of it all. We're dealing with all the MDAs, the permit issuing authorities. We're dealing with GRA, customs. We're dealing with the shipping lines. You're dealing with, so you should be an all-rounder. If you are not well trained, okay, how are you going to do this? So that is why he asserts that we are a very, very important link when it comes to exports, and so you need to be an all-rounder and very well trained. So he's right on point on that one. Efficiency is the key.
Great. Okay, so let me go online again and speak to Mr. Safiano and find out from you what policies you think should drive the export trading companies program, particularly when we talk about public-private partnerships.
Well, okay, thank you very much. This is very crucial because, as you must have learned from our seminar, in all countries where export trading company or the general trading company, as they call them, in Asia have been successful, they have come about through government action, support by government. So it means that government has to have a deliberate strategy to sponsor promotion of ECC as veritable vehicles of trade promotion, industrialization, and growth in partnership with the private sector. So government has to be ready, African governments have to be ready to enact policies and regime of incentives to promote ETCs. This policy, an example of that policy, I kept on referring to because I could see that it also demonstrates the seriousness of the Ghanaian economy. The National Export Development Strategy that has actually been pulled to come up with a target of about close to $26 billion in terms of exports earnings by 2029. So that is similar to the approach that was taken by the South Korean government by coming up with industrial policies and export promotion policy backed by government, but ensuring that performance of the export trading company are incentivized. So if you are contributing to assisting, let's say, Ghana economy to meet the target of needs, then you are entitled to government incentives. So there must be an appropriate policy. One of that policy, as I said, is the National Export Development Strategy for Ghana that has come up with clear intention of what the government wants to achieve. And so we see an export trading company as being able to assist Ghana to achieve that. But this should be complemented by fiscal incentives for that to be performance-based for those export trading companies that's contributing towards meeting the target of needs. Then I must say also, because finance is so crucial to the success of export trading companies, because these institutions by design are supposed to be large and vast, and most of them, particularly in their early life, they are highly leveraged. So any country that wants to be successful with an export trading company as a conscious special intervention institution must be prepared to rejig its banking regulations to provide more flexibility in financing of ETC. So in a nutshell, appropriate policy, set of policies, one of which must be clear intention of government. The policies must demonstrate clear intention of government to want to promote trade and increase true trade, industrialization and economic development, and then be prepared to deploy state resources to assisting private institutions, because these export trading companies are private institutions, they're commercially oriented institutions. But they are special institutions, that if we are successfully promoting them, can have a much wider economic implication and positively impact the welfare of the whole economy. Then, because of the need for huge amount of financing, which under normal regulations, the banking industry may not be prepared to support. We must look at a banking policy and tweak these banking policies to make it easier for the banking sector or the financial sector generally, I should say also including capital market, financial sector to finance emerging export trading companies and assist them to grow. And this is crucial in the early stage of the development of the institutions.
Right.
So government action, government support is crucial.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Safiano. Let me come to Dr. Adebiyi and find out from you. In your presentation at the ETC seminar, you did indicate that Ghana's economy remained largely undiversified with three commodities, that is gold, cocoa, and petroleum, accounting for 17% of total exports. This, you said, makes Ghana susceptible to vagaries in the commodity market. Can you shed more light on this particular statement that you made during the seminar, please?
Well, thank you very much. I must apologize for some of the interruptions you are seeing in my internet. You see, the point we're making there is that if you also look at the structure of the market in international trade,
Doc, have you muted your mic? We can't hear you. I can't hear you. Is your mic on?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Great. Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah, sure. Yes, please flow.
Okay, very good. Well, the point I was making is that when you look at the structure of the market, the international market, you find that the primary commodity prices are highly volatile, or they are more volatile than the prices of manufactured commodities. So if a country therefore deals essentially or primarily in trading in primary commodities, that country becomes highly vulnerable, highly exposed to the volatility in the primary commodity market space. Look at, for example, petroleum oil. Look at crude oil. Look at the swings in petroleum oil. So any country, for example, relying absolutely on crude oil export will be in serious difficulty when those swings take place. And those of us who deal in cocoa, Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, we also know how these are devastated some of our economies, where you suddenly find either through market forces or through even collusion of consumers of this product, prices drop drastically. So the point we are making is that primary commodities are generally highly volatile in price terms compared to manufactured commodities. And you know, economists have found some expressions for this. Some call it resource cost theory. Some call it the Dutch disease. And what they are trying to say, in effect, is that you have commodities that you are relying on, and they become a cost instead of a blessing to you. Because when you had a large windfall, you fritter, when the thing comes down drastically, then you start running up and down. So they call it the paradox of plenty. And this is something that characterizes countries that rely too significantly on primary commodities. And look at the three major exports from Ghana. They are primary commodities. The gold, the cocoa. Thank God, cocoa is getting some values, some processing values now. The gold, the cocoa, and of course, the third product, which is now crude. So you look at all this. Well, since they are primary, and this, look at what has happened in the oil market in the last couple of months, and look at how those countries that rely essentially on oil have been devastated. There are some boom, and then all of a sudden they have some crash, and then every country is involved. It starts scampering for. So that's the point we are trying to make.
Right.
That the reliance on primary commodities exposes national economies to the vagaries of those markets.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Adebe. There's a question here for you, the two of you. I don't know who would take it. This one says, my name is Abna in Tema. I would like to know if these export trading companies will come to solve some of the logistical deficiencies and information gaps that is hindering exports in Ghana. Which one of you will attempt this one?
Well, let me just say something, and probably can probably fill the gap. You know, one of our presentations we made at the seminar is that an export trading company is primarily an information gatherer.
Right. And
we said this information we are talking about transcends or goes beyond just information of, it's not a buyer's directory. It's a whole set of information that goes to the standard the markets require, the processing, the packaging, the essentials that countries look for, the information on what the market needs and the way the market needs it, where the markets are, and what are the swings in those markets based on historical or cyclical projections, and so on and so forth. Detailed, extensive information provisioning is one of the key services of ETCs.
Right.
And so, an ETC, for example, will not advise production until the market says there's a need. So, in essence, we say paradoxically that production starts in the marketplace. Those are the kind of things that ETCs do. They generate information that drives market. Information drives market. And so that's one of the key things that ETCs do. And then in terms of all the ancillaries, all those services connected with trade, these are some of the things that ETCs also do. Sufyan just mentioned this now. They are not just dealing in goods, they are also dealing in services. They are warehousing services, they provide freight, they provide insurance, they handle transportation and all those things. And each time they are doing it in bulk. They are doing it with economies of scale at play. So when you see them do all of this, what that translates into is a drop in the unit cost of doing business, and if the cost drop, even if the revenue or price level stays the same, the profit margin will increase.
Right.
Other things being equal.
Right.
So those are the kind of things we are talking about.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Olufemi Adebiyi, he's an SME specialist and organizational strategist, and also say a big thanks to Mr. Kayode Safianu, who is an export trading company specialist and organizational strategist as well. They joined us all the way from Nigeria. We're grateful to you, gentlemen, for joining us. We know that as and when the need arises and we call on you, you would oblige us. We are grateful to you, Doc. We're grateful to you, Mr. Safianu.
Thank you.
Right. So let me come into the studio and engage Mr. Akrong. But before then, we'll go for a quick break. When we bounce back, we'll continue the discussion. Please stay with us.
Every Every now and again, Goil makes good things happen. This time, Goil has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goil Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. Goil Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. Goil Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with Goil Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. Goil has that sorted. Goil, good energy.
Electricity, then pay your taxes. Our taxes, our future.
Because you see, without our taxes, we wouldn't have good roads, good schools, better hospitals, street lights, and other very important social amenities. When we pay our taxes, we give our children free and quality education. Talga, my money too small. Why should I pay my tax? Look, small. Salifo, it doesn't matter how small or big your business or income is. You still have to pay your taxes. The little taxes from each and every one of us, when put together, could give your community clean water, or that deprived school with tables and chairs. Please pay your taxes. It is your responsibility. It is your civic duty. It is the law.
Impressive factory. If only I had listened to you, I wouldn't have been in this mess. That devastating fire virtually wiped out the whole factory and my warehouse.
Remember my misfortunes last year? Serene Insurance Asset All Risk Fire policy that I took were there to pay for my damaged stocks in the warehouse. And my machines that were affected by the floods have been replaced. My accident vehicle is back on the road thanks to Serene Insurance motor policy. Telling my goods are on the high seas, covered with their marine cargo insurance policy. I was just telling Ajima about Serene Insurance.
Oh, Ajima,
tell him more.
As a road contractor, I make sure I do my contractors all risk insurance for the projects and then workers' compensation for all the workers on site. With Serene Insurance, they will make sure they will cover your unknown tomorrow today.
Serene Insurance, a new face of insurance. Call us now.
MPS Terminal 3 is Africa's new state-of-the-art container terminal at Tema Port. For manufacturers, agro-processors and traders, the new port means business can be done faster. This infrastructure boost will improve Ghana's port handling capacity, connect more trading routes, and oil the engine of growth for the economy, creating greater opportunities across all sectors as Africa's markets merge and become the largest trading bloc globally. MPS, we connect, you thrive.
All right, so you're welcome back. We're coming in studios now. We have Mr. Edward Akron still in the studio. He's the president of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders. And recently, like you saw the stories up there when we began, they launched the GIF Research Hub. We just want to find out from him what it is about and what you seek to achieve with it.
Thank you very much. You know, my brother, when they say when the story of the hunt is told, unless the lion tells his side of the story, that story will always glorify the hunter.
Absolutely,
okay,
yes.
Because we as freight forwarders, in fact, the Ghana Institute of Freight, we are very well plugged in into the core basic information that you can get.
Right.
We are very well plugged in.
Right.
Because like I said earlier, we deal with every single facet, every single MDA, the GRA, the importers themselves, the exporters, every single one. So you can imagine if we are short, we lack any source of information, then you know there's a certain deficiency.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we have no choice because this research is very critical to our sustainability. And so we found this is something my predecessor had been dreaming about. We have tried several,
right.
But now we've gotten to the point. In fact, with the fourth industrial revolution in play, we don't have a choice. Yeah. Okay, the information is also easy to come by because then there are scientific methods now that we can use.
Right.
So what we did was actually get our people, train our own people, and then we decided to launch this research hub.
Right.
What we did do, we are going to gather information as we can. And already, even from the daily conversations that we have from this program, trust me, I'm immediately initiating one research, topic on export information. Okay. It's core to our business. So that once we do this, and then our own members can actually access this information, okay, and use it in their business, is going to sustain us. Yeah. Again, we would want to influence policy.
Right.
So that the things that if we gather this information, all the articles that we write, and the outcomes of these research that we do would inform policy, the policies that government makes. Yeah. Okay, and that is why we came up with the GIF Inside, and I'm sure you've seen this, which was launched.
Absolutely.
Now this is going to be a quarterly journal. Yeah. And we have serious writers. We're going to do serious research into all sorts of areas which, profit on our businesses,
right,
and then also on government policy. This we intend to do because like I said, it is very critical to our sustainability as a business.
I just want to find out from you how often we would see, findings of your research published.
So this is what I said. It's going to be a quarterly.
Okay.
But we're not going to stop there.
So the findings are going to come into the GIF Insight.
Into the Insight.
The quarterly journal.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
It's going to come into the Insight, and this is going to be widely disputed.
Okay.
In fact, in Africa.
Okay.
For starters, before we go worldwide.
Okay.
But already we are getting offers even from like the World Bank. Because like I said, they know we are plugged into the primary source of data.
Right.
I mean, we are receiving all the data. We're making the payments of duties. We're dealing with the MMDAs. So when it comes to fees, it comes to duties, they know, I mean, we are the right source to come to. Okay, so it's important that we tell our story, gather, and again, like I said, we intend to influence our policy for the good of the nation.
In 30 seconds, what collaboration do you expect from stakeholders? Just in 30 seconds.
From academia, from all stakeholders, we want to gather all the information. Those who are also interested in writing to, just to improve our business, we are gathering. Of course, you look at the first edition, realize that we have a vast array of writers, industry players, our own practitioners, even. I wanted to give props to Dr. Augustine Blay for giving us the first article.
Executive Secretary to the Vice President.
Yes, his article into the paper. And so we're very much appreciative of all of this. And we believe that this is going to go a long way to also affect policy and also, sustain our credibility.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Eddie Akron. He's the president of the Ghana Institute of Freight Forwarders. Joining us in studio tonight for our import. Indeed, would also like to say big thanks to you for watching and for staying tuned to us. Remember, our import is proudly brought to you by the Ghana Revenue Authority, Goil Company Limited, Serene Insurance, Ghana Link Network Services, and indeed Meridian Port Services. It's powered by the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority. Thank you so much. God willing, next week we shall bounce back with another wonderful edition. But don't forget to watch the abridged version on Ghana Television every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. My name is Kennedy Mona. We wish you a super week ahead, and we urge you to stay and keep watching the rest of our programs. Good evening.
Metro TV, insightful and inspiring moments.
The world has seen a lot of evolution in recent times.